What is the best Dungeons and Dragons character you've ever played?
Wingardium Leviosa.
A human fighter who rolled a 20 during an item check and ended up with a vial of liquid that wasn't labeled. The next session we were in a pretty bad fight and I was about to die, so I used my turn to drink the liquid. I was completely healed but unconscious. The party carried me to a camp they set up and everyone slept for the night. When we all woke up I was no longer a human but a baby silver dragon. I was pretty useless for a few sessions as the DM wanted me to go through the process of growing, but once I was old enough to carry people on my back, things started turning into a ton of fun.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'm enjoying the guy I'm playing now, Jacob Fun. He's a university researcher working on a project to build a reactor to split the atom. One small meltdown later, he emerged completely irradiated with magical radiation, unlocking his ancient Fey powers. It's a lot of fun playing a sorcerer, and the random magical effects that can fire off whenever he casts a spell are fantastic. Last game, in the middle of a fight, he turned himself into a sheep. Still managed to knock out a guy though.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I played a caster who almost entirely cast sleep spells. I'd cast it on all sorts of creatures and tie them to all sorts of things. I'd tie them together, to horses, top and bottom, wagons, top and bottom, sometimes I'd tie them to rocks on cliff faces. I'd cast sleep on entire towns, one building at a time, terrorizing whole populations with a strange illness that makes them fall asleep only to be in some place other than where they started, tied to something.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Them with magical ability. Cassius Venn. A wizard with the divination school. The premise was that this guy was a card player, who uses magic to cheat at life. His casting style was manipulating cards, sort of like Tubal-Cain Alhambra, which he would pull from a magical reactive deck. His backstory was that he borrowed heavily from a mob boss, bet it all on cards, and hit the really long odds and lost. So now he's doing everything to clear the debt or die in a very unpleasant manner. He also had a false identity as a legit magical professor at a mage's college. The documentation of his admission and tenure was initially fake, but he's got enough magical ability and contributed enough data that nobody really questions it anymore. He also has a bunch of real magical apparatus that looks like fake magical apparatus. People always assume he's lying badly about being a wizard, all the better to blindside.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Not D&D but the Dark Eye. For one short campaign we created the most idiotic character we can think of. I created a dwarf named Bjorn. I put his curiosity stacked trough the roof. Which means, you have to investigate even if it's clearly a trap. The party is walking through a forest. You hear something rustling in the bush behind you. While the group decided to wait or ignore it, Bjorn went headfirst into the bush before someone could say something. You fall over and find yourself on the ground next to a black wolf. Well, FCK. It went on like this. A dark ally. Investigate, you hear a woman singing in the fog. Investigate. A treasure chest, might be something valuable inside. We made our heroes immortal because we would die so often. But we had a good laugh.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Morty the largemouth base. I was turned into a human by an evil witch angler's spell after stealing bait from the hook for the 5th time. I'm just trying to find a way to reverse the change or find a way to breathe underwater, in order to return to my underwater kingdom. I still speak all fish languages and have a natural affinity for water.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Anybody tell her what she is doing is wrong. Her interpretation of what people say is the correct interpretation. Dragon Heist spoilers: when tasked with finding a unicorn and bronze dragon scale, Gronk found a single piece of corn and asked around until somebody could tell her how big a bronze dragon was so she could use some rope to measure out a scale. She considers herself a noble because, unlike some other party members, she doesn't wear bells. She is overly protective of baby orcs, goblins, doesn't understand that she needs to get consent from players before throwing them at things, and is sometimes surprised by her own shadow. I also have a cleric who finds healing blasphemous, and a culinary assassin. I've got so many. I think my orc bard is my favorite right now. Her name is Gronk, and like all good bards has names bestowed upon her and her things with the likenesses of great musicians. She tells horrible fourth wall breaking dad jokes, and puns at every opportunity. She is fond of the theatre, but her memory is not so great. Gronk can sing fairly well, but often mixes up lyrics to well-known songs which leaves friends and foes alike in fits of laughter. Gronk is dumb, and that causes problems. She doesn't know how to actually cast her spells, and as such they happen as a result of her doing something else and not realizing it. For example, Gronk is very good at knocking on doors and getting them to open. You just have to knock harder. Sometimes when she taunts people they just die from fright. At 7 minutes 12 seconds tall she is a strong independent woman and will not let.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I had a character named Trank in a game of Apocalypse World. He had an ability that let him basically show up without explanation in situations. One of the other players had a character who was the leader of a sex cult, and Trank would spontaneously appear whenever they did their cult rituals, just to hang out.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I once played a cleric who followed a deity that I want to say had either the Retribution or War Domain with Longsword as his favored weapon. For the life of me, I can't remember the deity, and I don't know where that sheet would be anymore. But essentially, between his domain spells and access to swords, he was basically what paladins wish they could be. He had almost the martial skills of a paladin with the spellcasting access of a cleric. He also liked to collect a wide variety of swords we found during that campaign module. It was a much more fun way to play cleric.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I DM most of the time so I don't really get to play that many characters. That being said, I do end up role-playing as a lot of NPCs. My favorite one so far was a pet shop owner in a random town my players were visiting. I had offhandedly mentioned there was a pet shop when my players asked what shops the town had, and for some reason they were really excited to go there. I decided at the last second that this guy's pet shop would be a failing business as most in this town didn't have the money or luxury to own pets for the fun of it, and if they did own pets they put them to work, i.e. hunting dogs, so this nameless NPC gets really excited to see 5 adventurers enter his shop and inquire about his pets. He was so ecstatic to do business he threw in a free puppy with every purchase. I really played up this guy's excited desperation. The party ended up leaving with like 10 puppies. We
Wingardium Leviosa.
all liked this NPC so much he kept showing up in various towns the players went running the same business after it failed in the previous town. Every time he saw the players he got excited and would ask them if they wanted to buy more pets.
Wingardium Leviosa.
When I was doing a one-shot for 2 of my friends, and one of them created a dragonborn barbarian who always wore a trenchcoat named Certainly, pronounced certainly. In the middle of the session the other player, who was playing a living plant named Broccoli, asked if he notices anything about Certainly. The player playing Certainly out of character said you notice what appears to be a tail. When they got back into role-playing mode Broccoli asked is that a tail? To which Certainly responded what tail? Very loudly. Later on they had gotten into an encounter and Certainly's trenchcoat had been taken off and it was revealed that Certainly was actually 2 kobolds in a trenchcoat the whole time. In the next one shot we played in the same player got a wand of true polymorph and transformed himself into an ancient golden dragon.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Primus Holderbeast, my male pixie fighter. Being a pixie, he has innate invisibility which really helped me stab people in the eye. Also, as a pixie, he had two forms. One was a human form, where he was about 4 feet tall, and the other was his natural form, about 3 inches tall, with wings, meaning of course, that he could fly. He was originally created as a side character for my wizard. We were playing a modified 2nd edition game, but he quickly became my preferred character. His charisma was stupid high, as was his dex, and just for fun, I made his strength a 19. He had a disturbed fascination with eyeballs, and his trademark kill was stabbing his target in the right eye, then ripping out the other eyeball in his human form. He carried the bag of holding for our party, as his invisibility and flight made him the best to conceal it, and would randomly collect dead bodies in it without
Wingardium Leviosa.
telling the rest of the party about them. But, alas, as the party entered the dream world, he grazed against a dream bubble, and has been lost inside indefinitely. That also means that the party's bow, with about 60k gold, countless gems and rare artifacts, other deceased party members, and about 5 random dead strangers are lost forever. R.I.P. Primus. You were the best character ever.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Group needed a new healer, so I rolled up a 40-year-old, jaded, ex-combat medic/soldier. The party loved picking fights in taverns because that's how you find the more interesting quests, so he took to standing on the sidelines until the dust settled before wading in and patching them up. He ended up as the dad of the group and would often negotiate our way out of trouble after our face negotiated our way in. During important fights he would prowl around the sidelines and pick off anyone who turned their back on him. In our final fight against the big bad we were almost wiped out, everyone but him was bleeding out and the big bad was gloating. It was at that point I reminded everyone that he was a cleric and demonstrated that healing spells weren't my only magic weapon by finishing the big bad off with a charged lightning bolt. After stabilizing the party we returned to our home base.
Wingardium Leviosa.
And my game group disbanded. I'm hoping to bring him back someday.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Played my first cleric as the head of a revenge god religion. I played him like a televangelist. Most of my stats were okay, but I had extremely high charisma. I'd only act as a form of revenge for motivation, and those I helped paid back to the church. I got some members to not only join the church, another member became the high priestess. We didn't right wrongs, we were lawful chaotic greedy fanatics that destroyed those that wronged others. I got some to join by withholding healing until they converted. Others I tattooed with a screw, our religious symbol, before raising them from the dead. The campaign was to solve a mystery of a town being robbed. It was the home of another player. We killed the thieves, and donated everything to the town if they became the site of the Church of Mel Gibson. As all his movies are about revenge, I renamed the town Melville. The DM asked me
Wingardium Leviosa.
to roll a percentage dice to see how many would join. I rolled a 0, followed by another 0. I completely took over 100% of the town, including the other party members' parents. This led to the DM to try to weaken us to get the game under control. He sent a lich to reduce the numbers. My high charisma stated that I could have lots of NPCs, though when the lich tried to attack I surrounded myself with a wall of first-level bodyguards casting cause light wounds, which took down the lich easily. So then the DM decides to introduce the father of the high priestess as a bad guy. This campaign had us take him out in his castle. So we did. At that point I insisted that she inherit the castle and head up a second Church of Revenge. It was at this point where the Church of Mel had pretty much poised to take over the world, as I was going to hook up the disciples their own kingdoms.
Wingardium Leviosa.
As I walked by, I threw them across the room because Thunk don't need apples and proceeded to go upstairs, where there was an extremely large frog in the bathtub. Rolled a 29 animal handling. Thunk has a surprisingly good CHA score, and now Thunk has a familiar. Next session, we were investigating some bandit raids on a village. We got to the edge of the forest to find the bandit camp, with a good portion of them sitting around a large fire. The rest of the party started to discuss a plan, but Thunk got impatient. Ran out of the forest at top speed, yelled Thunk cast surprise, missed all of the bandits and instead smashed the fire, causing a huge plume of smoke to shoot out and conceal the entire area. Would have just stood there staring at his hammer in awe if he could still see. Thunk. Half-orc barbarian with 20 SDR and 7 INT, wielding a two-handed hammer with spikes on one side named Earthbreaker. He's so dumb that he thinks he's a wizard, so anytime he attacks someone with his hammer he yells Thunk cast smash. Or Thunk cast magic missile if he punches someone, and then he just says he missed on purpose if it doesn't hit. He's really a big lovable oaf who loves animals and hates it when people aren't polite, so if you don't say please or thank you he starts to get mad. I honestly think it was more luck than the DM doing things in my favor, but things always seemed to just work out for Thunk in a way that he became more and more convinced that he actually was a wizard. One time we were investigating a haunted house, and none of the traps that caught the other players stopped Thunk because he just didn't care. Some cursed apples were set out to entice us and
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'd a guy who was a farmer/wizard. He kept trying to use magic to find ways to improve his farm's productivity. For instance, he tried to use entanglement to boost his yield. I allowed it, but I'm not sure if the official manual would have agreed with me.
Wingardium Leviosa.
In one of the campaigns I was in, the bard collected seeds and fruit all over the place. We were all trying to figure out why, and one day we asked. And he responded that he used them for plant growth. His idea was to throw the seeds behind us while retreating and then cast. Boom, instant obstacles for the enemies. Still an ingenious use of that spell emo.
Wingardium Leviosa.
She was a big fan of kittens. She eventually realized she'd been a paladin all along. And got a kitten. I had a half-orc player, who was raised by two gay former paladins who fled their theocratic state when an entity began co-opting the religion to try to raise a minor demon of the similar name to godhood. She was raised with strong morals and a desire to protect the weak, but always assumed an orc could never have been a paladin due to original sin of the race. She was massive, strong, and mentally around 12 in some respects. Her first instinct was to try and talk things out, which never went that well because she'd grown up isolated in a hidden orphanage and had no diplomacy. And not great charisma. And larger than average tusks made common pretty difficult. She was considered ugly even by other orcs and was pretty heartbroken over this. If the other PCs wanted her to take out goons in a hurry, they generally resorted to telling her they'd last seen them curb-stomping kittens.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I played a half-orc barbarian named Grumkill or Cordial or something equally disgusting. High SDR/Dex, low Wis/INT. Carried a flail and a shield. Schizophrenic, or possessed by ghosts. It was never confirmed by myself or anyone else if the ghosts were real or just figments of his imagination, but as a side effect, he was deathly afraid of anything supernatural. Even in times where I could obliterate someone, if they were a magic user or some kind of enchanted thing, he'd turn tail and run his ass off. He died trying to jump over a pit of spikes. In his heart, he truly thought he could clear the jump. And I believed in him, too.
Wingardium Leviosa.
A Discworld troll. The DM was nice enough to create a template for me from Hill Giant/Earth Elemental. I was 12 feet tall and weighed nearly 2 tons. I wasn't too bright, but I knew enough not to let anyone disrespect my hat. I loved playing this character because the group was prone to analysis paralysis. When things ground a halt in discussion, one of the other characters would nudge my troll and suggest, "Why don't you stroll over there and ask them to?" Which was code for charge at them, bellowing incomprehensibly.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Aquilius, the Aarakocra cleric. We were playing with extremely loose rules on D&D. The first time my character got drunk, I woke up the next day missing a kidney. I asked the DM if I could use a spell to restore it. He allowed it. I rolled nat 20 and the DM said I feel a little more swollen than usual, and my character figured out that I accidentally gave myself 2 kidneys, bringing me to a grand total of 3. Later on we found out that because of this, it made my character immune to alcohol. So to make easy money, we would kick into bars and have this skinny bird challenge the biggest and toughest guys there to a drinking contest. I had gone through many trial and tribulations to keep my party alive. At some point I was one of the only few left conscious in the party, facing a giant metal titan about to kill us for stealing some cursed armor. I had just learned the invisible disc
Wingardium Leviosa.
spell and asked the DM if I could use all the spell slots at once to make it more powerful. He allowed it, and I protected me and my party from being crushed and dying. Years after the campaign ended, we retired those characters, and we would tell stories of them later in life. My character became an arch-cleric, meaning he had a tower with all his stuff in it and would heal those in need of it if they managed to get to my keep.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Happy Time Harry, the Banjo Bear. We were using some homebrew material which included the Vect race. Vect are essentially self-aware golems. I had been tinkering with the idea of a robot bard inspired by Bender from Futurama and his love of folk music. When developing his backstory, I realized that we totally have robot bards, and he became an escapee from an animatronic band. He proceeded to roam the countryside singing songs, telling jokes, and trying to understand all the joy his emotionless self was bringing to those around him.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Back in 3.5, my friend was running a Dragonlance game. Honestly, I wasn't interested at all, but he was excited, so I made a character. Since I didn't really care, I went for the most ridiculous thing I saw as an option, a Minotaur wizard. Zerga's S. Ethmar was the longest running D&D character I've ever had. I had pages and pages of spells, more strength than our fighter, and about 100 scrolls of fireball. The memorable thing about that campaign was how many deaths we had. My joke character was the only one to survive 4 or 5 near total wipes. There was one new character session where the rest of the party thought I was onto something, so we ended up with 2 minotaurs, a centaur, and like a satyr or something. We went from level 1 to like 16 or 17. I retired and founded my own Academy of the Arcane.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Rest of the party. Now he's desperately searching for a cure for rabies, so I don't have to stop playing as Fandango, the single greatest adventurer the world has ever seen. After the tragic demise of Nid Flinders, my unarmed monk character, I have been playing as Fandango. A flamboyant dragonborn fighter, he speaks with an accent that can vary between sounding French, Spanish and German depending on how much he's been drinking, and always refers to himself in the third person. He's an incredible flamenco dancer and fiercely loyal to his friends, but his absent-mindedness tends to cause them trouble. He yearns to be a legend passed on through time and brags and exaggerates about his every triumph, such as the time he killed a wolf with a daffodil, or when he killed 1,000 Frenchmen single-handedly. When in actuality the wolf had an allergic reaction and he caught rabies trying to save it, and in fact there were only 12 Frenchmen, and he merely burnt their camp to the ground in a bungled attempt to convince them he was a real dragon after they kidnapped the
Wingardium Leviosa.
I made an elven monk with high strength, dexterity and charisma who wore tiger-striped clothing and a matching hooded mask into battle. We didn't have a proper bard, so, with his charisma being the highest, he doubled as the group's face and diplomat to stranger, friend, and foe. He specialized in grappling, and often postured, posed, and taunted in battle. He was El Tigre Elvo, luchador, determined to become El Rey del Ring. He left the party when he began to embrace the ways of the Rudo, putting him at odds with the ideals of the paladin and cleric who were his traveling companions. His ultimate fate is unknown.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Usually the DM, and if a player usually a wizard. However, we did a dragon killing campaign and I was a player. We had some homebrew rules where when you went down to -5 horsepower you were either scared or lost a limb, an eye or an ear based on a dice roll, -10 and you were dead. I started the campaign as a beautiful elven archer, high stat rolls doing lots of damage, but we were constantly getting blasted by dragons and it was absolute carnage. My character manages to go to -5 quite a few times but never die. The campaign fizzled out, but my dude had a missing eye, ear, foot and hand by the end of the campaign. He never did die either. It was heaps of fun. So somewhere out in the D&D world is a dragon-hating Rect 11 archer, presumably stuck PTSD for the remainder of his long as life.
Wingardium Leviosa.
For D&D/Pathfinder specifically, a dragon sorceress who idolized her epic level necromancer grandfather, and was sent to the unconquered lands. It was a kingmaker campaign, by her father, since having a child in a new kingdom would be worth much more politically than marrying her off to whatever archmage he could manage. She started out as a slightly racist necromancer, firmly lawful neutral leaning lawful evil. But then another player came in who was of a similar persuasion, but more in control of their destiny. They got married, and over the course of the campaign she shifted into a firmly ruthless masochistic high-level necromancer queen who turned to the arcane to have a higher than 100% employment rate, as the country was constantly expanding. For something other than D&D, my favorite character was from Princess the Hopeful, and she got into comics at a young age and decided with
Wingardium Leviosa.
absolute conviction that she would become a superhero, and because of some intense family politics, she also resolved to be the absolute best at fighting, since being as close to flawless was just what was expected. She had a lot less of a character arc, but it was just fun playing someone who was a lightning-fast wrecking ball who liked hanging out with people, and it really sucks that that's the kind of lightning in a bottle I doubt I'll ever really capture again.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Herrick the Hunter, a wizard that has firearm proficiency that imbues his bullets with magical effects, so a normal bullet suddenly does an extra 2d6 lighting damage, or he imbued a bullet with a magic missile effect, meaning it auto-hits but only for a max of level 3 magic missile damage. He can use his spells or use a gun, but he can only use certain spells in his bullets because he has to custom make the bullet to withstand the power of a magically infused shot. At level 15 he can spend his turn imbuing his shot with 2 spells. I am at level 10 and the first chance I get to use that I am imbuing a shot with magic missile and fireball and shooting our goblin rogue in the ass for stealing my robes and spellbook when we were level 4.
Wingardium Leviosa.
During the 5e beta I was a mulet-classed warforge that was a level of each different class. Basically, to explain each level, he was a prototype killbot for one of the major clans of the world. After each level he was rebooted with no memories except for the class skills he learned with each assignment.
Wingardium Leviosa.
An Aarakocra monk named Branron. He tested the strength of things around him with his beak and was pretty oblivious to his surroundings. He was a badass in a fight and comedic relief for the party. Got us into a lot of trouble just wandering off and grabbing things off shelves to test with his beak.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Survive. Each time for these I have rolled a nat 20, to the chagrin of the story DM. Gave this same goddess a talisman of invisibility that was the gift of another god. Turns out that this had the ability to hide one from the gods themselves, which gave this one a tool to upturn the Pantheon. In my defense, it was give a reason not to die or the DMs were going to insta-kill me. Tossing a hilariously tough, for the party, plot point in their laps was apparently enough to survive the day. At this point, I got the hint that I was trying too hard, and being 8 months in I had a handle on effective roleplay and party job fulfillment, doing rogue things really well, so since then I've been playing more seriously and playing my character into a redemption arc that the story DM has helped with. My second ever D&D character, a tiefling rogue which I'm still playing now a year and a half later, same campaign, 5e with homebrew story. Not being accustomed to roleplay, I chose to go in loud until I got a handle on it, aka deliberately playing chaotic stupid, with the justification that he's a veteran from a merchant lord's private army, so he has nothing to lose. Turns out he had a lot to lose. In the time I've played him, he has been turned into a woman, girdle of femininity. Lost a hand, then requested that the half-orc barb lop the arm off. Almost died, but could play it off as an accident as opposed to the punishment for theft that it was. Been cursed by the forgotten and waning goddess of misfortune. Scratched graffiti on the wall of an abandoned temple, nat 20 for craftsmanship. Yeah. Basically, random lethal things would happen that would require a high dex check too.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I played Pickup Adventurers League for a number of years. Every week without fail, there'd be some teenager with a bullshit anime character that was more of a liability than an asset on account of the rule of cool. So I went to took the piss out of it by rolling the anime character that I felt would be the most ineffective, die in one session anime character I could find, Yui Hirasawa from K-On! There was one small problem: Yui is incredibly charismatic and stronger than maybe someone of her size should be. She plays a guitar that is far too large and heavy for her, a Les Paul Classic. And by virtue of the fact that playing the guitar is easily the best thing she can do. So she's a bard. With high charisma. Even INT and Wizard 8 don't counteract that. Not only does she survive, she thrives somehow. We get to a point where she's at level 7, and routinely buffing the party and
Wingardium Leviosa.
debuffing the opposition such that she makes battles a lot more lopsided than they should be. And to top it off, one day, a boulder falls on a party member's leg. We've got a cleric to heal him, but we've got to get that boulder off. Our tanks, a fighter and a paladin, try to lift it to no avail. So Yui, me in an annoying falsetto, starts singing, "I'll make a man out of you" as I pick up my D10 and D20 to make a strength check. She's buffing herself for this check. She's got a +3 on such rolls from her SDR attribute. I couldn't give her 8s across the board except for charisma by L rules, and as a result, she wound up with a 15 for SDR. I roll the dice while singing the song myself. 20. 10. That's a 33 total on a strength check. This 110-pound girl lifts this 2-ton boulder off our party member like it's nothing. That was the moment I realized I'd done fucked up with this character that was supposed to die the first night I played her.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I played a priest of the goddess Kainu. She was the goddess of healing in our world. As such, I could not do damage at all. Then, we got sent to Ravenloft and I lost contact. You may think that losing connection to your god would make you abandon everything and do what you need to do to survive, but you'd be wrong. Instead I prayed. Non-stop. Eventually, I'm talking months of real-life playing, I was able to make some contact and my healing powers started to come back. This all culminated years later, when I raised my friend from the dead. It was intense.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I've got a low-level Hexblade warlock named Grey that seems to be a fan favorite around the table. He's a half-elf from a small farming village that went exploring in a nearby tomb with some friends, and used his mom's old battle axe for protection. He found an ancient, spooky-looking tome while down there, and as soon as he laid his hands on it, the battle axe disappeared. He found out he could summon it at will, and cast some warlock spells, but also hearing voices of his patron every now and then. He's got a thick country accent, and is just kinda young, dumb, and innocent in a way.
Wingardium Leviosa.
All it takes is one bad roll for the loot to break and I'm left with playing sweet chin music. This was back in 3rd and I would like to make an order bard again or multi-class as an orc bard barbarian. I just cannot find a group near me that plays. I had 2 I enjoyed. A tiefling rogue and an orc bard. The tiefling, named Gladness, was fun because I focused on diplomacy and speech skills over combat. The DM always beat my rolls because the tiefling looks like a demon, so I could not persuade my way through anything because of appearance. The orc bard, named Josen the Fellloot. DM allowed me to be a full orc. I went with bard and had a high charisma and high strength, but my rolls for wisdom and intelligence were not too good. So for the backstory, he always loved music over fighting, so he was cast out of the orcs. Well, being of low intelligence, he could not actually play a lute, but tried his hardest. Even with checks like bardic knowledge and others, I knew, but my orc was too stupid to understand common tongue and just knew orcish. DM allowed me to use the lute as a weapon, treating it like a hammer. Combat was fun, but
Wingardium Leviosa.
have a great scythe, same properties as a great sword in our loose 5e campaign. Campaign moments. We got into combat with some skeletons or something. Everyone laughed when the cripple pulled out a 2-handed weapon, then he stood up and their jaws were on the fucking floor. The DM gave Stephen's wheelchair a device that could turn liquids into mists, potions, mostly, then spray them in a cone behind him. We entered a tomb where skeletons poured in through the walls to the point of smothering us. I proceeded to dump pure alcohol into the sprayer, light it, and activate said sprayer, rocketing Stephen through the skeletons and into a nearby portal. Stephen, being generally distrustful of magical objects, ruined the DM's idea. Basically there was a magical barrier around the town we arrived in, so we couldn't leave. The DM's intent was for us to get a staff that could control skeletons and overwhelm the barrier with sheer numbers. Stephen, upon seeing the staff and hating magical bullshit, throws an ore at it. The ore vibrated at an object's natural frequency, which means it'll introduce energy into the object until it shatters. This broke the staff. Stephen and Jean Terry, Orc Bard, had a loot duel in an inn room. Jean rolled a 20 and literally invented finger tapping on the spot. Stephen rolled a 1 and before the DM could describe how bad it was, I replied, "I have enough with this shit," and, realizing I'm not gonna win, snapped the loot over my crippled knee. Later, we were on a ship, and attacked by skeleton pirates. I rolled to swing over to the enemy ship, but had disadvantage because cripple, literally the DM's words. When I botched the roll, I made a strength save to catch myself with the great scythe, and it worked. Sadly, our campaign stopped. There, I'm told that the tabletop gaming club at my high school, which I founded and ran in senior year, still talks about Scythe Wheelchair Guy and my other character, Grigor the Russian Wizard. I made a veiled German, from Bloodborne, named Stephen Frost once. He was a fighter, but didn't get to a point where I could choose an archetype since the campaign was cut short. Because we were going forward in time from our previous campaign, which I ran, highlights included making him and backstory. Stephen being a time traveler, who was flung 10k years into the future because of our universe's god of misfortune, Gary, the glorious Gary, Gary the incompetent. Gary was an NPC I made in the previous campaign with a history of botching rolls and getting into sticky situations. It seemed like if Gary rolled 9/10 times it was a 1, I always rolled in the open for fairness. I cleared him being in a wheelchair unless in combat with the DM. We agreed it would be a result of fantasy muscular disease, causing his leg muscles to degenerate with use. The DM also agreed to let me.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Sorbian Starwind. Unreasonably powerful 3.5e Mystic the Urge Battle Cleric / Air Wizard. 3rd level Cleric, 7th level Wizard, 10th level Mystic the Urge with all the magical item crafting feats. With some feat and materials choices he could wear heavy armor and cast 9th level Wizard spells with no penalty at 17th level Mage casting table, plus, he could also cast with the 13th level Cleric table and they stacked. He also had decent fighting ability. There wasn't anything he couldn't do, except live up to his own standards.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Tass the Goblin Sorcerer. Her and her trusty sidekick Beaker the Owlbear, aka her mount, were trying to defend their goblin clan from a dragon attack when her wild magic mixed with the dragon's magic causing Beaker, her and the dragon to be transported out of the Fae and forward in time. While trying to find a way back she fell in with a band of adventurers. In their first combat she rolled a 1 on a spell at the worst time. An uncontrolled blast of magic from her sent the party's fighter/ranger through a 2nd floor window. He was alive but badly injured, and that is how we had a one-eyed fighter. She was excellent, treated everyone in the party like she was their grandmother. She was very old for a goblin, except she would offer them snot-based dishes constantly.
Wingardium Leviosa.
You are startled by a high-pitched voice shouting, "Hi, I'm Tobin." You turn around to see a dirty child with blonde hair dressed in a patchwork clothes. He stands erect with an outstretched hand and a beaming smile. Hi, I'm Jeffrey, you say tentatively as you shake his proffered hand. Hi Jeffrey, what you doin'? He asks you as he vigorously shakes your entire being. Just, milkin' me, cc woos. You trail off as you notice the hamster the size of a St. Bernard floating on a carpet just over young Tobin's shoulder. That's Chippo, my battle hamster, he beams proudly as he sticks his thumbs in his belt and rocks back on his heels. We're looking for a dragon, you know, big lizard thing what flies. We're looking for a copper one and I'm gonna ride it. I'm a dragon rider Yano. He proclaims excitedly. I don't think there are no dragons around these parts. You say?
Wingardium Leviosa.
Just before a great roar off in the distance cuts you off. Thank the great space hamster, we've found one. Come on Chippo, let's go get EM, he says as he leaps onto the hamster's saddle. He and the hamster fly off into the distance and you wonder if you've had a sunstroke. Then you notice your pail of milk missing, and the realization hits you. You stomp the earth and shake your fist to the heavens as you shout God's damned kinda.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I feel like it's a tie between two. Agnij, a Naga from my first ever campaign. It was homebrew, but he was basically like a monk who could constrict enemies. He was basically Dr. Tank, and he popped quite a few people in his time. The other is Gilravok, my Gripply swashbuckler. He started out lawful neutral, then became lawful evil, and now he swings along the evil spectrum. He is a $5 foot long who will stab you with his toothpick of a rapier and laugh as you die. Or get pissed off and stab you because you insulted him.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My cleric Hazel is my main character I play. She's a former disciple of the goddess Sea Kathleen, our DM as her deity, but was kicked out of her temple for sleeping with all the other disciples. She's got a tattoo that says cabbage in celestial. She's exactly 1 inch taller than my boyfriend's character. And she won our PvP fight against a tank, a ranger, and a rogue.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I once played a strong but stupid character in a post-apocalyptic world. He originated from a place where people had random letters and numbers as names. I was attributed KDBFXMR. As a joke, I read the letters as if they were a name, and so it immediately replaced his actual, pronounceable name and is now an inside joke with my friends.
Wingardium Leviosa.
My current character Ethrander of the noble house of Voranaya the Ranger. He appears in my friend's campaign as a hard-headed ranger with a fierce temper. He was exiled from the Isles of the East for 17 years until he hunted down a dragon and fought the Drow with the Guild of Broken Blades, with his companions and soldiers of the guild.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Oh, that is a tough one. It's a big toss-up between one of my very first 2E toon and one of my current 5E toons I am playing. In 2E, I got to play as a half-copper dragon, half-human named Gemma who was raised as a rogue by her copper dragon father. She stole a cursed ring from a Zentarum wizard that allowed him to track her every move, and ended up putting her father in danger due to her greedy and impulsive nature. She fled to the halls of Undermountain to hide, and ended up meeting and falling in love with a human paladin of Soon named Bethany, another player's character. They have made appearances in some of our group's other games because the pairing was so popular. In 5e, I'm playing a tiefling fighter/sorcerer criminal named Journey, who was conscripted to fight in the Goblin Wars in Korima. After, she becomes a mercenary for hire. She has been a victim of a lot of
Wingardium Leviosa.
racism and prejudice due to her heritage. She was tempted by a devil to betray the party and act as a mole for a long time. And was promised a huge plot of land and a powerful title for her cooperation. She is using the land to found a tiefling majority city so the race can live free of prejudice. The town is underway and I have had to switch to a new toon, since she is kind of stationary for now, and the group affectionately refers to the town as Sanctuary.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Flynn Storius, the 5e feebled bard with an affinity for storytelling, talking to birds, and being as large in heart as he is in size. I introduced him with the grace of my DM mid-combat with some trolls since my other PC died a few sessions prior. He walked out, calmed their emotions, pat one of them on the head, and stopped the conflict to give my party members a chance to heal, because they were losing, and joined the fray with them to get them out unscathed.
Wingardium Leviosa.
This is my first D&D character and by far my favorite. He is a brass dragonborn named Vorash. He was abandoned as an egg in the faucet and was raised by a really old elf. The elf taught him the ways of the druid, and when he was 14 he went to his first druid meeting, happens once every 2 months or so, and joined the Circle of the Moon. When we started playing he was 19 and was on the quest seeking so many answers. Why was he abandoned, what were the ways of his true race, and where was Pero, the elf that raised him since his birth and left and never came back? He was the best character I've ever played. Really got to dive into his backstory.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'm loving my current character. Prosper, a halfling rogue who escaped a bad situation in Canada, but in the future. She's electively mute, and has some serious PTSD. And the entire party has just sort of adopted her. She's very confused by this, but is slowly starting to trust them.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Froiler Scarfsnarks, the Aarakocra, kind of humanoid bird race, bard. Regularly knocked out and concussed from suddenly taking flight during fights in small spaces. Terrible cover songs that inadvertently were a boon to the enemies. Just generally terrible at everything.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Torin Greystone, dwarf battle cleric, 4E wielded a mace with a leather loop at the end so he could swing in it tight circles before smashing an enemy's face, would prefer to talk things out BS fighting, and took frequent naps. And he sounded like an old redneck. Or Helm Tarnation, you're casting Tasha's hideous laughter again. I hate that damn spell.
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'd have to go with Cornix Proud Talon. He was a Tengu, bird person, hunter with a psychopathic moose companion named Arsenio. He thought of himself as some sort of nobility since his family used to be rich. Yet he was chaotic good. Whenever we were in combat he would always shout Arsenio as we charged into melee. One time we had captured a kobold prisoner, and I had Arsenio eat a dead kobold in front of the prisoner to intimidate it. Cornix also never slept.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.